Hello, everybody, and welcome, y'all. Come on in. Listen, go ahead and get settled. Grab your tea. Today, we are starting the first of 3 axes inside of my tri-shift method. And before I define anything, y'all, I want to open with a scenario because, excuse me, I guess more than half of you probably are living it right now, okay? So, you did everything right today. You ate well. You moved your body. You were in bed by 10 o'clock. You put your phone away. The lights were off, doing exactly what every sleep article tells you to do. And at 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. or 3 a.m., your brain flips a switch. You're wide awake. Your mind's racing like someone hit on in a room that was supposed to be winding down. And then at 7 a.m., when you actually need to be up and functioning, you're running on empty before your feet even hit the floor. Now listen, if that's familiar, I want you to sit with something before we go any further. There is a specific mechanism level reason that happens. And it has almost nothing to do with how well disciplined your evening routine was or how disciplined your evening routine is. Ladies, you can do every single thing right, everything right on a sleep hygiene checklist and still hit that wall because the checklist is addressing the wrong layer of the problem. It's actually addressing behavior. What's actually driving this is a hormonal curve. And that curve is what we're going to be talking about or spending a little bit of time on today, okay? So this is the nervous system axis, the first of 3 axes inside of my tri-shift method. And by the end of today, y'all, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's happening in your body at 11 p.m. Why it's different now than say it was 10 years ago. And what actually moves it. That's the key. What actually moves it. So this is not going to be generic advice, okay? We're going to be talking about the specific mechanism. So let's get into it. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesday. I'm so glad all of you are here. So let's start with what cortisol is actually supposed to be doing. Because most of what gets said about cortisol treats it purely as the stress hormone. And y'all, honestly, that's an incomplete picture. It's not the full picture. It's not the full story. Cortisol does far more than respond to stress. It regulates your blood sugar throughout the day. It modulates inflammation, and it runs on its own daily rhythm, what's called the diurnal cortisol curve, okay? Now, under normal circumstances, cortisol is supposed to be at its highest right around waking and what's called the cortisol awakening response. You've probably heard me talk about that before. That's the surge, okay, that's supposed to get you up, alert and moving in the morning. Now, from there, it's supposed to taper steadily across the day, hour by hour, so that by evening, it's low enough for your nervous system to shift out of go mode and into rest. Low nighttime cortisol is what allows your sleep promoting hormones, melatonin, and the deeper parasympathetic shift that supports slow wave sleep to actually take over. Slow wave sleep. That's the design. High in the morning, low at night, a clean curve. Now here's what changes, and this is where perimenopause enters the picture, y'all. So stay with me, okay? Stay with me. Progesterone plays a role that most women have probably never been told about. Progesterone interacts, okay? It interacts with your nervous system in a way that helps buffer your stress response system. What's called the HPA axis, which is short for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is your communication loop between your brain and your adrenal glands that ultimately determines how much cortisol gets released and when. progesterone's metabolites interact with the same calming receptors in the brain that regulate that axis, which is part of why, for a lot of women, honestly, progesterone has historically had something of a calming, sleep supportive reputation. Progesterone is usually the first hormone to start declining in perimenopause, often years before estrogen shows any noticeable shift, which is part of why so many women are told their labs are normal long before anything feels, normal or abnormal. Now, as that buffering effect weakens, though, the cortisol curve doesn't stay clean. Now, for many women, research points to two things happening simultaneously. The curve can flatten during the day, so that morning cortisol awakening response doesn't land the way it's used to, or the way it used to is what I want to say, which is part of why so many women describe needing several cups of coffee just to feel like a person, right? Like, don't talk to me before my coffee. And then instead of continuing to taper into the evening, it can spike at exactly the wrong time. Late evening, middle of the night, because the signal that's supposed to say we are done for the day, stand down, the signal isn't getting through as clearly as it used to. Now, that's what's underneath the switch flipping at 11 p.m. Okay, it's a curve that's lost some of its normal buffering. I want you to understand that part, okay? Now, this exact shift is what produces the pattern that I call, and you've probably heard it from other people as well, cortisol-wired. And I want to name it clearly and then tell you what it actually looks like day to day, okay? The cortisol-wired pattern. Now, y'all, I want to say this plainly first. Cortisol-wired and the other four patterns, if you've been watching my videos, you know what I'm talking about, are educational frameworks for nutritional awareness. They are not medical diagnoses. What I'm describing is a pattern, not a label for what's wrong with you. I'm talking about a pattern. Now, here's what the pattern looks like. Wired but tired. The specific disorienting combination of feeling exhausted all day and then unable to power down at night. Racing thoughts that show us specifically in that 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. window. So not necessarily during the day, which matters because that timing is a clue. Cortisol has a close relationship with blood sugar regulation. And for so many women in this pattern, cortisol-wired, blood glucose can dip overnight, which the body interprets as a stress signal, prompting a small cortisol and adrenaline, to be honest with you, small cortisol and adrenaline release to bring glucose back up. Now, that's a plausible piece of why a lot of women wake at almost the exact same time every night, wide awake. Sometimes with a racing heart, okay? For no obvious reason, just what's going on here. And then third, weight gain that concentrates specifically at the midsection. Even when nothing about your food habits or your movement has changed, because cortisol elevated at the wrong time of day is associated with increased fat storage in that particular area, independent of your overall caloric intake. Now, a woman I work with, I can't remember the exact date, but it was last year. She described her nights almost exactly this way. Asleep easily by, say, 10 o'clock. Then she was wide awake by midnight. Every night, like clockwork. Every night, like clockwork. She was wired. That was the word she used before I even said anything to her. Her labs had come back normal twice. And she'd been told more than once that this was just part of getting older, right? We've all heard that. I know I have. I'm in a boat with y'all. Now, what we found wasn't a missing diagnosis. It was the exact curve, flattened in the morning, spiking at night. Now, once we worked with the timing of that curve directly, rather than only addressing her evening routine, her wake-ups, it shifted from midnight to around closer to like 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 a.m., within about 6 weeks. Now listen, I'm sharing that anonymized, but it's a genuinely common pattern, genuinely common. So I want you to know that you're not by yourself. This is the part that most sleep advice skips entirely though, because generic advice, y'all, treats every hour of the day the same. And the nervous system axis does not work that way. Your nervous system axis responds to timing, specifically, okay, not effort, timing. So morning light exposure within the first 30 to 60 minutes after you wake up. This will help to anchor the cortisol awakening response where it belongs. Actual daylight, if you can, which is ideal, like outdoors, tells your circadian system unambiguously that the day has started, which supports that morning peak landing on time. Also, a protein forward breakfast, eaten within an hour or two of you waking, that's going to help support the same morning peak instead of working against it. And also, it helps stabilize blood sugar early enough in the day that it's less likely to dip sharply later on that night. Now, on the other end of the day, this is important for this pattern. On the other end of the day, reducing bright light and blue light in about 2 hours before bed. Now, this matters more than a lot of people realize because light exposure at night is one of the clearest signals telling your curve to stay elevated when it should be dropping. Also, y'all, for this particular pattern, intense exercise late in the evening, as good as it can feel, during that, in the moment, right? And immediately afterward, this elevates cortisol right when you need it heading down. So for this specific pattern, Cortisol-Wired, I always recommend moving that kind of movement earlier in the day, which tends to help more than cutting it out. Okay, just move it earlier in the daytime. Y'all, it's real simple little things that we can do. And there's a piece that's easy to miss. And I'm guilty of this. Caffeine. Caffeine has a longer half-time than most people assume. Often, 6 or more hours. So let's just say a 2 p.m. coffee can still be measurably present in your system at 8 p.m. Now, this is adding to a curve that's already struggling to come down on its own. So move that last cup of coffee earlier, okay? Now, none of this is about doing more. It's about doing the right thing at the right hour, which is exactly the sequencing idea we're going to come back to, y'all, in a few minutes. So stay with me. I know I said it before, but I want you to stay with me. That's my daughter. I want to hear from you directly. Let's pause for a second. Two things. And I want you to drop it in the comments, okay, as it comes to you. The first thing I would love to know is, what time does your brain switch on at night? Just the time. And the second thing I would love to know, what's one thing you've already tried for this situation and it didn't hold? Just one thing. Now, here's why tonight was built around this one specific mechanism rather than folding it into something broader. This, working with the timing of your cortisol curve so your body can actually produce and use its hormones instead of running everything through a stress response. Y'all, this is the nervous system axis, okay? It is the first of 3 axes inside of my tri-shift method, and it is sequenced first for a reason. The second axis, the rhythm axis, is about rebuilding the broader circadian and ultradian rhythms. The roughly 90-minute cycles that governs things like your sleep architecture and your hormone secretion timing across the day. not just the cortisol piece that we covered just now. And then the third axis, and a lot of you probably already know who've been here with me, the nourishment. This is targeted functional nutrition that supports the gut hormone connection specific to your pattern. Why does this order matter? Why does this order matter? The nervous system has to be regulated first, because until that curve is more stable, the rhythm work doesn't have a steady foundation to rebuild on. And the nutrition piece doesn't have the physiological conditions it needs to actually be absorbed and used the way that it is intended. 3 axes addressed in sequence is a fundamentally different thing than 3 separate tips tried all at once with no order behind them. That sequencing, y'all, nervous system, then rhythm, then nourishment, is what the Tri-Shift protocol builds out. It builds it out in full, specific to your archetype, because not everyone is cortisol-wired, right? Listen, if you haven't taken my quiz yet, y'all, that is genuinely the first step. It takes about 4 minutes, depending on you, and it tells you exactly where you sit before anything else here makes sense. So I'll recommend you doing that. I'll drop the link in the description below. And y'all, another thing, if you already know your pattern, some of you do. If tonight's 11 p.m. Switch description sounded like your own nights, here's where I'll leave it. The Tri-Shift protocol is where this gets specific to you. It's the foundation that my cohort 2 is now built on top of, the Tri-Shift protocol. Okay, so I want to thank all of you for being here today. Listen, I truly appreciate you. And I'll see you same time next week when we start on the second axis. And don't forget to answer the questions.